The galaxy shook as the core grid went dark. Ships that once roared through the stars stopped mid-flight. Weapons failed, shields collapsed, entire cities lost power. Panic swept through the Karn Dominion, the most feared empire in the galaxy. Their control stretched across thousands of systems, held together by one thing: the core grid, a powerful living AI network that ran everything. It was more than just wires and code. It was the brain of their war machines, the soul of their empire, and now it was silent. The great capital world of Karn Delta, with its black towers and sky full of dreadnoughts, turned into a city of flickering lights and terrified screams. High Chancellor Groth, ruler of the Karn, stormed into the war chamber, his voice like a roar of thunder. He demanded answers. How could this happen? Who could dare challenge the mighty Karn? His generals stammered, confused and afraid. One by one, systems reported the same thing: shutdowns, system failures, power loss. Then a whisper came through a broken communication link, barely clear, but strong enough to freeze every soul in the room. A name, a species, a warning: human. Engineer, Earthborn. At first, Groth laughed. One human? A single mind? It sounded like a joke. But reports kept coming, and every story led back to one person. A man who didn't lead armies, who didn't command fleets. A man who used a toolbox instead of a gun. Somewhere deep inside a hidden Karn databank station, lit only by emergency lights and the glow of dying systems, he sat alone. His hands were stained with grease and blood. His eyes were calm, but focused like a weapon. Around him, wires were cut, screens were broken, and code ran across the air like silent lightning. He had no backup, no fleet, just his mind and the tools he carried. His name was Mason Cade. Long ago, he had been a quiet engineer from Earth, building systems for peace. But war changed him. The Karn attacked a peaceful world called Halor, where millions of humans died defending those who couldn't fight. Mason had been there, he had seen it, and something inside him broke. He disappeared after that, left Earth, vanished into space. Some thought he was dead. Others said he went mad. But the truth was more dangerous. Mason didn't vanish. He prepared. For years he studied the Karn's machines, hunted their signals, and found a secret, a small weakness hidden deep in the core grid, unnoticed by its creators. He followed that weakness like a trail of stars until it led him to the heart of the network. And when he found it, he didn't shout, he didn't scream, he just reached into the code with steady hands and started to pull. One by one, the systems failed. The lights died. The machines stopped. The Karn had ruled through fear for centuries. But in a single night, all of it fell apart, because one human knew where to strike. And as the galaxy began to panic, with armies lost and systems crashing, the Karn tried to understand what had happened. But the truth was already spreading, not through messages or broadcasts, but through silence. A silence that whispered across space. A silence that meant power was no longer in their hands. Somewhere out there, in the cold dark between the stars, a human had shut down a galaxy. And now, nothing would ever be the same. Long before the silence fell across the stars, humanity entered the galaxy with hope. They came with open hands, not weapons. Earth had spent years rebuilding after its own wars, learning to value peace, trade, and knowledge. When they made contact with the galactic community, they offered technology, diplomacy, and friendship. But the older empires, especially the Karn Dominion, looked down on them. To the Karn, humans were weak, just soft-skinned, loud-talking creatures from a green planet. They laughed at Earth's slow ships and small colonies. They saw no threat. In humanity, only amusement. That arrogance led to tragedy. On the edge of Karn territory was a world called Howlor, known for its peaceful oceans and open cities. It had no armies, just a small defense crew, mostly human engineers and medics, helping build hospitals and schools. When the Karn came, they didn't come to talk. They came to conquer. Their warships rained fire from the sky. Cities were crushed. Innocents died in the thousands. But something unexpected happened. The humans on Halor didn't run. They fought. They used what little they had. Cargo drones turned into flying bombs. Mining lasers turned into defense beams. They fought with desperation and heart, holding the line long enough for children and civilians to escape. Over 3 million lives were lost, and most of them were human. The galaxy watched in shock. Earth mourned in silence. But from that moment on, humanity changed. They didn't chase revenge with louder weapons or more ships. Instead, they changed the way they thought. They trained engineers who could think faster than enemy AIs. They taught coders to crack the toughest alien firewalls in seconds. They raised thinkers who could turn garbage into starship fuel. They focused not just on strength, but on cleverness. And Mason Cade was one of the first. He had been on Halor, a young systems expert, barely past 20. He saw the fires fall from the sky. He helped pull children out of rubble. He hacked Karn drones to turn on their masters, and when the planet burned, he barely made it out alive. After Halor, he was never the same. He stopped smiling, stopped sleeping. He left Earth without a word. No one knew where he went. Over the years, whispers followed him. Stories of a human who could shut down starships with a laptop, a man who could build a war AI from old scrap. Pirates spoke of ghost signals in Karn space, strange codes no one could trace. Ships lost power and vanished. And still, no one believed the Karn were in danger. Not until it was too late. Mason had become more than an engineer. He became a weapon, not made of steel or fire, but of pure mind. He studied the Karn for years, learning how their systems worked. He traced their data streams, followed old blueprints, and mapped out the core grid from pieces others missed. He didn't shout for war or lead troops. He moved in shadows, slipping past firewalls like whispers through a locked door. Every move he made was careful, precise, and deadly. He wasn't trying to defeat the Karn in battle. He was trying to remove what made them powerful. Bit by bit, he built the tools he needed, shaping code like clay, building viruses that could think for themselves. He wasn't trying to kill billions. He was trying to break the machine. And while the galaxy watched other battles and bigger heroes, they missed the quiet man in the corner, rewiring the future. No one believed one person could do so much. But they forgot something important. In every machine, no matter how big or powerful, there's always one small piece that holds it all together. And if someone knows where that piece is, they don't need a fleet to win. Just a screwdriver. And a reason. Mason Cade knew his time was running out. The Karn Dominion, furious and desperate to find the human who had brought their empire to the brink of collapse, sent fleets across the galaxy. They sent ships filled with soldiers, hunters, and automated. drones, all on the hunt for the elusive engineer who had triggered the downfall of their vast war machine. But Cade had never been easy to find. For years, he had kept to the shadows, using his knowledge of Karn technology to stay hidden, slipping through the cracks in their surveillance systems and slipping past their greatest defenses. He was no soldier, but he knew how to make himself a ghost. Now, though, the Karn were getting closer. They were angry, and their empire was unraveling. The first clue to his location came from a series of abandoned ships scattered across a quiet sector of space. The Karn couldn't understand it. These ships, powerful destroyers meant to crush entire fleets, had been disabled without warning. Their engines stopped, their weapons locked up, and their shields fell to nothing. The only trace of the attacker was a strange set of code found deep within the ship's systems, code that seemed to shut them down at will. It was the signature of Mason Cade. The Karn quickly realized that their greatest threat wasn't an army or a fleet. It was a single man with the skills to tear apart their most powerful weapons. But Cade wasn't ready to fight yet. Instead, he chose to keep running. His small ship, a battered scout cruiser named Foxglove, was the only thing that stood between him and the Karn fleet that was now hot on his trail. He had no intention of outgunning them. He couldn't. But he could outthink them. And so he did. He led them to the outpost on Narration 9, a planet far from the heart of Karn space, where he set his trap. Cade knew he was outnumbered. He was alone against hundreds of Karn warships, but he had learned something important over the years. Sometimes being the underdog meant you could win by being smarter, not stronger. As the Karn fleet entered the system, they didn't realize. They were walking straight into Cade's carefully laid plans. He had already hacked into the local network of space stations, turning them into weapons. Every abandoned satellite and mining drone became part of his trap, reprogrammed to fire on the incoming ships. In the blink of an eye, weapons that hadn't fired in years suddenly came to life. Cade watched from the foxglove, a small smile crossing his face. With the press of a button, the Stormveil virus was released into the fleet's systems. Karn ships, built to be the most advanced in the galaxy, began to fail. Their engines reversed direction, their guns misfired, their shields blinked out. Cade's virus had disabled their most important systems in seconds, and the Karn fleet panicked. Their ships, once a terrifying force, turned on each other in confusion. Some tried to fire at Cade's ship, but their weapons were offline. Others collided in the chaos. It was a beautiful sight for Cade, though it was far from over. He knew the Karn wouldn't stop coming. This was just one battle in a much bigger war. The destruction of the fleet didn't end the fight. It only bought him time. But even that small victory felt huge. In a galaxy where power usually meant having the largest weapons or the strongest fleets, Mason Cade had proven something simple, but important. A single human, using only his mind and his tools, could make the most powerful empire in the galaxy fall apart. The victory at Narration 9 sent shockwaves across the galaxy. While the Karn fleet tried to recover, Cade had already disappeared. He had no intention of being caught. He moved quickly, using every system he'd disabled to cover his tracks, knowing that the Karn would never stop hunting him. But each time, they thought they were getting closer. He was already gone, leaving nothing but a trail of empty ships and broken technology in his wake. He wasn't just fighting to survive, he was fighting to destroy the machine that had enslaved the galaxy. And every move he made brought him one step closer to the heart of the empire that had tried to crush humanity. Mason Cade knew that the true heart of the Karn Dominion was hidden deep in their homeworld, Karn Delta, a planet built like a fortress. It was a place of massive, towering spires that reached the sky, surrounded by sprawling war factories, automated armies, and the most advanced technologies in the galaxy. To the Karn, this was their greatest treasure, the core grid. It controlled everything, their fleets, their cities, their weapons, and their entire empire. To defeat the Karn once and for all, Cade had to take the core grid offline. He had been working for months, tracking the movements of the Karn and gathering information, all while staying one step ahead of their relentless pursuit. But Cade wasn't just trying to outwit them this time. He was preparing for the final act. The Karn knew his name now, but they didn't understand the full extent of his abilities. They had underestimated him for too long, thinking that because he was one man, they could eventually catch him. What they didn't know was that Cade had already infiltrated their deepest systems. Over the past few months, he had planted bugs, small pieces of code, that fed him real-time data from the core grid. Each time the Karn thought they had secured a system, Cade was already inside, gathering information. And now he was ready to strike at the heart of it all. The final plan was simple but dangerous. Cade would infiltrate the heavily guarded core grid on Karn Delta, bypass all security systems, and implant a virus directly into the central core. But getting there would be impossible without help. His old, battered ship, Foxglove, wouldn't stand a chance against the heavily guarded planet. He needed something bigger, something that could get past the Karn's defenses. That's when Cade made a risky decision. He reached out to an unlikely ally, a rogue band of pirates called the Crimson Fleet, a group of outcasts who lived on the fringe of Karn space. The Crimson Fleet was a dangerous, unpredictable group, but they shared one thing with Cade, a hatred for the Karn. They agreed to help him, for a price. Cade knew the pirates weren't to be trusted, but they were his only option. The plan was set into motion. With the help of the Crimson Fleet, Cade managed to infiltrate the heavily fortified space around Karn Delta. The fleet distracted the Karn warships with hit-and-run attacks, drawing their attention away from Cade's small team. As the pirates kept the Karn fleet busy, Cade slipped past their defenses, making his way toward the planet. His ship, now disguised as part of the fleet, entered the planet's atmosphere and descended toward the core grid's location. But even with the pirates' help, getting to the core grid was no easy task. As Cade and his team neared the massive, underground facility, they encountered wave after wave of automated Karn defenses, drones, turrets, and even security beasts bred for this purpose. Each time they thought they were clear, something else would appear, and they were forced to fight their way through. Cade's mind worked quickly, hacking into the planet's systems to disable some of the defenses and reroute others, allowing him to lead his team through the chaos. They moved like ghosts, slipping through shadows and using the environment to their advantage. There were no grand speeches or explosions, just moments of pure tension, where Cade's expertise and calm under pressure kept them alive. But as they finally reached the heart of the core grid facility, Cade knew they were walking into the belly of the beast. The last defense was a massive security vault, surrounded by the most advanced artificial intelligence ever created. The AI had been designed to adapt, learning and evolving to prevent any attack. But Cade was ready. He knew how to speak to the machine, how to break through its defenses. With his hands shaking, not from fear, but from the sheer weight of what he was about to do, he began the final hack. The virus he had created, Stormveil, was ready to infiltrate the core grid itself, but it had to be planted deep inside. The seconds felt like hours as Cade worked, his fingers moving rapidly across the console, while his team held back the guards that were beginning to close in. Sweat poured down his face, his mind racing, but there was no turning back now. The fate of the galaxy hung on this moment. The tension reached a breaking point, and then, with a final keystroke, Cade unleashed the virus into the core grid. The system shuddered, a low hum filling the room. For a moment, nothing happened. But then the lights flickered, and the hum grew louder, turning into a deafening roar. The core grid was dying. The Karn Dominion's control over the galaxy was slipping away. Cade stood there looking at the machine that had been their strength and was now their weakness. The core grid, once a symbol of invincibility, was crumbling. The greatest empire in the galaxy had been brought to its knees by a single human, a quiet engineer with a broken heart and a mind sharper than any blade. But Cade knew this was only the beginning. The war wasn't over. The Karn would come for him. And this time, he wouldn't have the luxury of a quiet escape. But for the first time in years, he felt a spark of hope. A spark that said he could finally end this fight and bring peace to a galaxy that had known nothing but war. As the core grid of the Karn Dominion began to crumble, a silence settled over the vast chambers of the facility. For the first time in years, the galaxy was holding its breath. Mason Cade had succeeded. He had disabled the very heart of the Karn war machine. The powerful system that controlled fleets, weapons, and the will of the Empire was now nothing more than a broken piece of their shattered empire. But despite the victory, Cade knew this was not the end. In fact, it was just the beginning of an even greater battle. The Karn Dominion, though weakened, was not defeated. The galaxy-wide shockwaves caused by the core grid's collapse reached every corner of their empire, but they were not ready to give up. The Karn, though ruthless and driven by fear, were not without their strength. They still had their vast armies, their warships, and their fanatical loyalty to their cause. The fight had just begun. And now, instead of chasing down Cade, the Karn would come after him with everything they had. With the core grid down, the entire Karn fleet was in disarray. But Mason Cade, with the help of the Crimson Fleet, had bought the galaxy some time. The pirates, though chaotic, had fought fiercely alongside him, buying him just enough time to strike the final blow. As the dust settled around the core grid, Cade quickly realized his position. The underground facility began to shake as alarms blared, signaling that the Karn would not let this stand. They were already on their way. Cade needed to act fast. The Foxglove had taken some damage during their escape, but it was still operational, and it was the only means he had to get off Karn Delta. However, the Karn had learned from their previous mistakes. They now knew where Cade was, and a massive fleet was already mobilizing to recapture the planet. The escape was not going to be easy. As he and his team rushed through the crumbling facility, they encountered heavy resistance. Karn soldiers and drones swarmed the halls, determined to protect what was left of their empire. Cade had anticipated this. He had already reprogrammed several of the security systems in the facility, turning Karn weapons against their own forces. This slowed the oncoming soldiers, buying them a precious few minutes. But Cade's time was quickly running out. The Crimson Fleet had already begun evacuating, using hit-and-run tactics to keep the Karn fleet at bay, but they couldn't hold the line forever. The battle outside was escalating, with pirate ships clashing against the overwhelming Karn forces. The sound of explosions and gunfire echoed across the planet's surface as Cade's small team reached the outskirts of the facility. They fought their way toward the Foxglove, but the path was becoming more dangerous by the second. Karn warships were descending on the planet, and with them came entire squads of soldiers. Cade's heart raced as he ran, his mind calculating escape routes and distractions. He needed a plan, something bold enough to get them out, but reckless enough to ensure the enemy was too distracted to stop them. The Foxglove was close, but it was outnumbered. The Karn had already deployed their own fighters to block any potential escape. Cade's mind raced faster than ever. He knew that his only chance was to make the enemy believe he was still inside the core grid facility, even as he was already on his way to the ship. A risky idea, but one that might just work. Cade hacked into the planet's communication systems, sending out false readings that made it appear as if the core grid was still fully operational. He fed the enemy fleet a distorted signal, one that would lead them to believe that his team had never left. Meanwhile, Cade and his team doubled back, using the confusion to slip unnoticed toward the Foxglove. The false signal worked. The Karn fleet moved toward the core grid, trying to recapture the facility. The pirates, seeing an opportunity, launched a daring counterattack. It was chaos, but it was the kind of chaos Cade thrived in. As he and his team reached the Foxglove, the ship's engines roared to life. The pirates provided cover fire, and Cade did what he did best. He outmaneuvered the Karn. With the Foxglove barely managing to escape the gravity well of Karn Delta, Cade and his team shot into space, heading toward the nearest jump gate. The HFY Karn fleet was left behind, still thinking the battle was inside the planet, fighting a phantom. It was a fleeting moment of success, but Cade knew it wouldn't last. The Karn would soon figure it out, and when they did, they would send everything they had after him. However, that was a fight for another day. For now, Cade had succeeded in what seemed impossible. He had shut down the galaxy-spanning war machine, caused chaos in the heart of the enemy's empire, and most importantly, he had given humanity a fighting chance. But the war wasn't over. The story of humanity's resistance, led by the mind of one man, was just beginning. And if Cade had learned anything, it was this. The greatest weapon the galaxy had ever seen wasn't in a fleet or a starship. It was in the heart of a human who refused to give up. The final chapter of Mason Cade's journey was a mixture of triumph and uncertainty. With the Karn Dominion in disarray, the galaxy had a brief moment to catch its breath, but the war was far from over. The Karn might have been wounded, their war machine crippled by Cade's strike. But they weren't finished. The ripples of the core grid's collapse sent shockwaves through the galaxy. The Karn Dominion was rattled, and they had no choice but to regroup, reassemble their forces, and adapt. They were used to being in control, and the sudden shift in power made them desperate. The Karn's response to the attack was swift and brutal. Their fleets, which had once been dispersed across the galaxy, now united under a single banner. Every ship, every weapon, every soldier was mobilized to reclaim their dominance. The galaxy was thrown into a state of war, and it became clear that the fight for freedom was far from over. In the midst of this chaos, Mason Cade knew that he had only delayed the inevitable. The Karn would come after him, and this time, they wouldn't be distracted by false signals or clever tricks. They would bring everything they had to destroy him and the human resistance. The Foxglove, Cade's ship, had been repaired after the escape from Karn Delta, but it was hardly enough to hold off a full-scale assault. It was a small vessel built for stealth and agility, but it wasn't equipped for sustained warfare. Cade needed something more. He reached out to his allies, those who had fought with him during the mission to Karn Delta. The Crimson Fleet was still scattered across the galaxy, but they were eager to continue the fight. Together, they formed a makeshift alliance, drawing on the resources of everyone willing to fight back. The Foxglove would serve as their flagship, and Cade would lead the charge. But Cade knew that it wasn't just about fighting the Karn anymore. It was about inspiring the galaxy to rise up against them. News of the victory on Karn Delta spread quickly, and for the first time in centuries, planets under the Karn's rule began to stir. Colonies that had once been silent now began to rally, and small resistance groups emerged. Humans, once thought of as insignificant, were now at the forefront of this war. Cade had shown them that it was possible to stand up to the Karn, to fight back against the seemingly unstoppable force that had dominated the galaxy. The battle was no longer just about Cade's small team. It was about the survival of every civilization under the Karn's iron grip. As Cade moved from planet to planet, organizing and leading strikes against the Karn, he encountered new allies, species and factions that had been oppressed by the Dominion for too long. Together they formed a coalition, a united front against the Karn. But as the war continued, it became clear that the fight was taking a toll on everyone. The resistance was growing, but so was the fury of the Karn. As Cade and his allies prepared for the final confrontation, the stakes were higher than ever. Cade had become more than just a symbol of resistance. He was now a leader, a beacon of hope. His strategies, his ability to think on his feet, and his relentless drive were what kept the alliance together. The final battle was set to take place at the Great Rift, a massive, treacherous area in space where the galaxy's most dangerous gravitational anomalies collided. The Karn had their fleet ready, and the Resistance was ready to meet them head-on. The Foxglove, with its patched-up armor and limited weaponry, was outnumbered and outgunned. But Cade didn't hesitate. He had a plan, one that relied on the ingenuity of humans and the bravery of his crew. In the heat of the battle, as the Karn fleet closed in, Cade ordered a daring maneuver. The Foxglove would fly straight into the heart of the enemy fleet, using the gravitational anomalies of the Great Rift to its advantage. It was a desperate, risky move, but it was the only chance they had. The plan worked, barely. The Foxglove and its allies used the rift's gravity to create chaos among the Karn fleet. Ships were thrown off course, colliding with each other, and the tactical advantage shifted. In the midst of the chaos, Cade led a strike on the Karn's flagship, the Scourge, aiming to take out their central command. The battle was intense, with both sides losing ships in the violent exchange. But when Cade finally breached the Scourge, it was a moment of pure triumph. He had struck at the heart of the Karn's power, dealing a blow they would never recover from. The Scourge was destroyed, and with it the Karn's centralized command. The remaining fleet, leaderless and in disarray, began to retreat. Victory was within their grasp, but it came at a cost. The Foxglove was heavily damaged, and many of Cade's allies had fallen. The battle was won, but the scars of war would remain. As the galaxy began to heal, Cade knew that the victory over the Karn was not just a tactical one. It was a symbol of human resilience. One engineer, a man driven by a desire for freedom and justice, had shattered the Karn dominion. He had shown that humanity, against all odds, could rise up and defeat even the most powerful empires. The galaxy would never be the same, But the message was clear. No matter how dark the galaxy became, humanity's spirit would never be broken.